Hello, and you're listening to your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
This Four-Eyed Radio production is brought to you by America Joy Print Shop. All your printing needs taken care of in one convenient place. Visit americajoy.com for business cards, flyers, banners, decals, car wraps, and more. Visit americajoy.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my web 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks, and with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios, and you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on The Fern. Yes, it's the show where we discuss bondage, James Bondage, all kinds of James Bondage, everything and anything to do with the world of 007. And today we're going to be talking about Bond's toys, because as we start the new year, we haven't had an episode come out since Christmas time, so it's nice to talk about things that we might have wanted to see under our own tree, but let's face it,
Yes.
It's just not going to happen.
Most likely not, yes. We should point out these are the Bond's non-living toys. We're not talking about the girls of Bond this time around. These are just the strictly the non-living toys. We're talking about gadgets and cars and vehicles and stuff like that, the fun stuff.
Yeah, so our definition of a gadget was something that was used in one of the films that was portable, and basically we divided it into categories. We have the dumbest gadget. We have top 12 Bond gadgets, and a Bond gadget was defined as a portable device that was actually used by 007 at some point during one of the official Eon films or Never Say Never Again. It doesn't have to have been issued to him in the first place, he just has to have used it. And then we have a small list of bonus gadgets. So other gadgets that you saw in the James Bond movies, which James Bond himself did not use, but were so cool we had to put them on the list.
Dang straight.
And then after we talk about those toys, we'll be talking about the toys that you can move around in. And those would be the top 15 Bond vehicles, 3 bonus vehicles, and the dumbest vehicle. And a vehicle is defined as a conveyance which James Bond himself actually pilots, drives, or somehow operates. A bonus vehicle is one that he didn't actually pilot, drive, or operate himself, even though he may or may not have actually been in it. Doesn't have to have been his. And then, of course, dumbest is pretty self-explanatory. And again, our qualifying movies were the Eon Productions films, going from Dr. No all the way up to Skyfall. And we also included Sean Connery's Never Say Never Again, because we wanted to.
I have to ask you, did you actually include anything from Never Say Never Again?
Yes, I did. In fact, I included more than one item from Never Say Never Again.
Wow. I did not from anything at all from Never Say Never Again. But that's okay.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a very interesting group of lists. I honestly only expect... So my prediction for this list is that Eric and I are only going to agree on one thing. Now, this is out of 18 total gadgets, and I believe, 19 total vehicles. I think we're going to have similarities where both of us have something on each other's list, but I think we're only going to agree on where something is placed once. That's my prediction.
I agree. I think that is very likely going to be the situation. I think we're going to have one spot that is just blatantly obvious, and we're both going to have that. I think everything else is going to be a crapshoot. I would be shocked if we have anything else the exact same placement or even within one or two of each other. I think they're going to be pretty darn different.
I think so too, especially since I now know that since you've said that you didn't use anything from Never Say Never Again, I used several things from Never Say Never Again, so I already know we're going to have some differences. So this will be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
This is why we have a show with two hosts.
Yes. if we had 3 hosts in here, we'd have 3 completely different lists as well. We could bring 10 people in and do this list and probably only have like 3 things in common amongst everybody. It's like the Powerball. It's like you have 10 Powerball tickets, you're going to have 3 numbers across all of them that match, but then the rest of them are going to be completely different. It's pretty much going to be how this goes, I think.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the gadget lists. And what we're going to start with is the dumbest gadget. And Eric, why don't you start? What is your dumbest gadget?
The dumbest gadget? It's tough because there were some real dumb gadgets in the Bond universe. I mean, there were some really just clunkers. Now, does this one have to qualify as a Bond gadget, or can this be under the same qualifications as what we laid out for the bonus gadget?
Any gadget. Bond gadget, so something that Bond himself used, whether or not it was issued to him in the first place, or it could be a gadget that someone else used, whether against Bond or just used it. It just has to have been used in the movie and be small, portable, just like anything else. So this is the most open category.
I would say probably... It's tough because you see a lot of, like, I'm thinking back to all the scenes where you see Q's office, basically, and his workshop, and where you see all these little gadgets, some of which are, like, really cool, and others are just, like, just ridiculously dumb. I think the rocket shooting out of the leg cast, for example, was just way over the top ridiculous to me. Yeah, and especially since it didn't really work all that well for the person shooting it. So, I would go with that one. Off the top of my head, that's the one I would go with. And I'll be honest, I didn't go through the whole list with that one in mind, so I didn't put as much thought into it as you probably did into your choice. I am curious to hear yours, though, because I'm looking at my list right now to see if your dumbest gadget turned up on my top 12 list.
I can completely understand your choice for a dumbest gadget, especially because if you think about it with the recoil, if you use that on someone who had a real leg, they wouldn't have it for long. And it is just kind of dumb because, I mean, let's face it, obvious gadget is obvious, and that kind of thing you don't necessarily want to be. But for this one, I took in, because on its face, this gadget is perfectly serviceable. For what it's supposed to be used for, it's fine. However, I went with the combination of bondinosity, to borrow the word that you used from our previous list, so how well it fits into the Bond movie and the Bond universe, and just how the scene in which this particular gadget is used played out. And it's really the only time in this whole movie I was kind of turned off. It's the shark gun from Live and Let Die.
Okay.
Because just blowing up Kananga looked stupid.
I will say that did not make my list. I did look at it and I thought about it. I'm like, it's a cool concept, but at the same time, he didn't even end up using the gun per se. I mean, he used one of the ammunition for it, but
yeah, he shoved the ammunition in his mouth.
Yeah.
So okay, the shark gun ammunition. I counted the whole thing, but that's fair.
The idea was sound, but you're right. It wasn't. It didn't play out well in the movie, and it did seem kind of off. So I'm not going to disagree with you there. And like I said, that one did not make my top list. So we're good. We're good.
Yeah. So there we have our choices for dumbest gadgets, and now we're going to go for our top 12 Bond gadgets. So these are gadgets that were actually used by 007 himself, whether or not they were actually issued to him in the first place.
Okay.
And bear in mind, they do have to be portable, which is really unfortunate because one of my favorite gadgets in all of the movies ever, I can't put on any list because it is absolutely not portable. But I'm not, so it's the Domination video game from Never Say Ever Again. That is just so damn cool.
If you have a big enough truck, it's portable.
It looked like it was bolted to the floor.
That's what they make ratchets for. That was a cool game. I would never want to play it because I've never been that good at video games to begin with, especially first starting out, like sitting down and playing a game for the first time. I always die a bunch of times, and I don't want a game that's going to hurt me when I am trying to learn it. So I'm good without playing it, but I watch other people play it.
Yeah. So we couldn't put it on the list, but I just had to mention it. It was just too cool. I had to say something.
Definitely. So we did a top 12 list on the gadgets.
Yep. So what is your number 12?
My number 12 was honestly the one that I was afraid you were going to point out as your dumbest gadget because it has been made fun of in other Bond movies. But I still love it. I don't care how unrealistic it is, especially in the way that it was used in the movie. But being one of my favorite movies and being an integral part of that movie, I had to go with the grenade pen from GoldenEye.
Okay, you frickin' pen clicker.
that was part of it. I'm like, yeah, click, click, click. And obviously it was so unrealistic because there's no way that he could keep track of how many times the pen was being clicked, and there was no indication that he was disarming it or arming it, and for him to suddenly like, okay, now's the moment, boom. But at the same time, it worked in that movie, I felt, because the movie did have a lot of cheese factor to it. And so a cheesy tool in that movie, I was okay with.
Okay, fair enough. I will say that particular gadget, the one thing I like about it most of all is it's just desserts for jerks who click pens because I think they deserve it. I hate pen clickers. I just do. But that is not number 12 on my list. In fact, I'll give this away. It is not on my list at all.
I didn't think it would be, honestly. I was scared that it was going to make your dumbest gadget. So I'm just happy that didn't end up that
it's got utility. And let's face it, the exploding pen was way, way cooler than the exploding Kananga. So, no, for my number 12, even though it's something that isn't necessarily awesome, and in fact something that I would never personally use, just the bonding necessity of it, I'm really starting to like that word, and also the backstory behind what happened later with it, I had to include the rebreathing device from Thunderball. Okay. So the little cigar case size thing that he sticks in his mouth so that he can keep breathing for more than 4 minutes underwater, and which the Royal Navy called up the effects people at EM Productions and said, so how did you make it work? And they said, he held his breath.
What I love about that particular gadget is it did turn up in other movies as well, in various forms, not just Bond movies. It's turned up in almost identical form in other movies and other TV shows even. In fact, fairly recently, within the last couple of years, it was I don't know if you watch this show. Have you ever seen the show White Collar?
I have seen the ads for it, but I've never watched it myself.
It's actually a really good show. I was shocked. I started watching it only because my wife started watching it. I was on Netflix. She started watching it, and I was doing other things, reading whatever, and I'd catch little bits of it, and it was amusing, and I was like, oh, okay, And so I decided, what, heck, I'll give it a shot. It's on Netflix, and so I binged watched the first 4 seasons of it, and I'm like, actually, it's really well written. It's actually got some really decent acting in it, and there are some fun moments, and there was one time when he was given a breathing device almost identical to the one in Thunderball, and in fact, as he's looking at it, and they give it to him in a cigar tube, and he's looking at it, he puts it away, puts it in his pocket, and goes, somebody's been watching Thunderball. And so that kind of won me over. I'm like, not only, I don't mind them copying things from other movies like that if they're going to at least give credit where credit is due, and so I appreciated that they did that, and it worked. It was an integral part of that particular episode, so I do recommend giving the show a check out. It's a fun show. I will tell you that item is on my list. I'll give you a little bit of a clue. We're not going to get to it for a little while. So good choice there, although I'm surprised it's as low as number 12.
Basically, the reason it's so far down on my list is I would never personally use it. And the reason for this is I can't swim. So
I would never use one either.
Never be in a position to use it.
Yes, I agree with you. I don't have a problem swimming, and I don't have a problem with water. I don't have the desire to be under it for very long, and I especially don't want to be underwater in a position where the only thing I have to breathe is a tiny little thing that has, supposedly 4 minutes of air, something like that.
About 4.
And that's if you're lucky. And no, I'm not down with that. Full scuba gear, maybe for a little bit, but honestly, underwater just doesn't intrigue me that much.
Yeah, I'd rather look at it from behind glass in a nice pressurized container. But hey,
there you go.
The rebreather not only worked for James Bond, it worked for Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
So,
Misa think you took that idea from another movie. Oh, number 11. And this one is another one that I was almost scared that you weren't going to that you were going to put in your dumbest category, but I liked this not only because it was a very useful gadget. I mean, it was a huge utility gadget in this particular film, but also it was a precursor to actual devices in some way, at least in design, not in functionality, obviously. And that is Bond's Ericsson cell phone from Tomorrow Never Dies, the one with the stun gun and the fingerprint scanner and the remote control for the car and all of this stuff. Obviously, especially in that day, thinking of packing that much technology into a phone was was unheard of. Now we're almost there. I mean, take away the stun gun. You've got phones with fingerprint scanners. You've got phones that can remote control various objects. You can control those little helicopter things with a phone. So to think that they took it one step further and did with a car, I mean, really, it's just plausible enough to make my list, and so that's what clocks in at number 11 is the cell phone in Tomorrow Never Dies.
I'm not going to fault you for that choice. I'm just going to say we'll be talking about that again at some point.
Wow, all right.
So
what was your number 11 then?
My number 11 is something that I'm kind of ashamed to say is my number 11, especially because one of my, as noted, with the exception of the rebreather, one of the things that made me put something on lists is that I would be perfectly cool using it. Mm-hmm. That would be the X-ray glasses from The World Is Not Enough.
That one almost made my list. If we'd have done more than 12, that would have been on my list. That was one that after much deliberation, I kind of took off my list, and only because the only reason it fell off my list was because of the obviousness of it. I mean, everybody's always wanted X-ray glasses. I mean, look in the back of old comic books. You can supposedly send away for X-ray glasses for $1 or whatever. They're just cool. X-ray glasses are just cool. And so actually, now that I'm thinking about it and making the argument, I probably could have bumped the grenade pen for the X-ray glasses. Shoot.
And the thing is, there is talk of an app for an application, for a device like Google Glass or something that would perform not necessarily the function in real life, but, a false function. Basically, this would be a straight up porn application. Because, of course, let's face it, what drives technology? The military and pornography. Those are the two things that do it. And I'm not making this up. In fact, I discussed this with some other friends once upon a time on a different show, and it's kind of scary. But yeah, I admit it. I would totally use the X-ray glasses for good, only for good.
No, it's absolutely true. Both the military and the pleasure industry, I'd go so far as to say in general, do drive a lot of technology, because every time you want to, I think the military and the space programs, things like that, I think they drive the innovation of the new technology. I think the entertainment industry, if we want to put it kindly, drives the application of that technology more so. That's how I think that it goes. It's like, you get these people here working for the military or for NASA or something like that who build the thing in the first place, and then the Vivid or Braziers comes along and says, "Hey, you know how we could use that?" So no, I totally agree with you there, and no, good choice.
And for my number 10, one that I already know is not on your list whatsoever, and this is going to sound dumb, and maybe it is. However, the way in which this particular device was used was just awesome. It was one of the best parts of this movie. For Never Say Never Again, James Bond's cigarette case, which he managed to convince a gullible security guard was actually a bomb with a tiny gyroscope inside. Even though all it was a cigarette case.
I remember that, and I actually did come across that one. I had forgotten about that scene, but then when I was looking at lists, of course, to put together lists, and I did come across that, and I remembered, and I thought, hey, that was pretty cool. But at the same time, I didn't consider it for my list because it wasn't actually a gadget per se as much as it was an invention of Bond's imagination. So I didn't count it in my mind, but I can totally see where why you would go with that. So that's cool.
I figured he convinced someone else that it was a gadget in such a way that it might as well have been. And the fact that it really wasn't was just awesome. I mean, that was a true laugh out loud moment. So as far as contribution to the Bond universe, the Bond mythos, and totally something James Bond would do,
yes,
I had to include Cigarette Case from Never Say Never Again as my number 10.
All right.
So what did you do, sir?
Number 10 for me was another item from one of my favorites, GoldenEye. And this is another one that, practicality-wise, it's never going to work. There's no way that something like this could ever work. It has absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever. But by God, it's cool. And, this comes from my years of being a fan of Batman and other things like that as well. It's the grappling hook belt. Obviously, There is no such thing as a filament that thin that can hold that much weight. There probably never will be. The
spider silk.
Yeah, it's just there's nothing we know of that is strong enough to withhold that much in that small of a container. Yes, there are things that are getting close, and who knows, maybe someday they'll invent some type of material. Maybe they'll find a way to make one of these aerogel type materials into a cord. Who knows? But as of right now, no way it's going to happen. But damn, it was cool. And damn, it was fun. Especially with the debate whether, it's only made for one and all this. So that's my number 10, the grappling hook belt from GoldenEye.
And just my two favorite applications of that in other movies, of course, Star Wars, rescuing Princess Leia, that was just cool. And then line of dialogue, how much do you weigh? About 108. And of course, Vicky Vale goes up, Batman goes down. Eventually, you weigh more than 108.
Oh, that was a great film, too, right there. 1989.
Last
Batman.
great film of the
Love
1980s, I consider it.
Fantastic film. Still one of my favorite Batmans, even including all the new ones. Still one of my absolute favorites. So that brings us to number 9. What did you have on number 9? Breaking the single digits.
Indeed, and this is indeed used for breaking in. It's for practicality value, and just because, this would be really damn handy, but of course I'm way too ethical to possibly consider using such a thing, would be the Sharper Image credit card from A View to a Kill, which also happened to be an electronic lockpick. You could not only pick electronic locks, but it also apparently had a small magnet because he unlocked an old double-hung window with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're going to build a credit card lockpick set of some sort, you want to include a magnet, right? Sure. Not that totally. That magnet would, erase the magnetic strip that you're trying to use to... We're not going to delve too deep into that, but...
Well, you'd actually have to think, though, in order to read the card, you have to have some kind of magnetization, so I can see it. It's just... Yeah, it's cool. So the Sharper Image credit card from View to a Kill is my number 9.
All right. For me, the number 9, this one is going to be probably... This could be the second most boring item that made my list. And this really, it made my list more because it was pretty much the only gadget in this particular film. And it was one of the first, quote-unquote, gadgets that we ever see Bond using on film. And that is the Geiger counter from Dr. No. You had to actually send away special for it to get a Geiger counter to find out what craziness was going on Dr. No's island. But for that reason, basically because it was one of the first times we'd ever seen him use any kind of high-tech gadgetry of any sort, even though this was obviously completely based in reality. Geiger counters do, in fact, exist, folks. A little tidbit of trivia you may not have known. But we didn't really see him using a whole lot else in Dr. No. And so that one being one of the first and one of the only in that film, it makes my list and it cracks the top 10 into number 9.
Fair enough. I'll spoil it right now. It's not on my list at all. But from a Bondy necessity standpoint, I can totally understand why it's on the list. So I can't fault you for it.
All right.
So what about your number 8, sir?
Number 8, we get into a little bit more fun, and this is one of the first items on my list that was not officially issued to Bond directly, but he did end up using it. And this is, I separated this from another item on my list, which we'll get to a little bit later, but that is the Garrote watch. Or is it Garrote or Garrote? How do you pronounce it? Garrote. Okay, so I was right the first time. I shouldn't have questioned myself. The Garrote watch from Russia with Love. Obviously, it was not his to begin with. It was the assassin's, but he ended up using it, so I counted it, and it's just cool. Plus, that's another item that has made its way.
We also saw that he kept it.
Yes, yes, we did. We saw that in the. Was that in?
On Her Majesty's Secret Service when he's allegedly cleaning out his office.
Yes, cleaning up his office, just an excuse to show off. Hey, look! Remember these other movies? Yeah, we're still part of that. So he kept that, and it's also another thing that's made its way into other pop culture references as well. You've seen this type of device in many other films and TV shows and stuff going forward from this movie. So it's cool, and Bond ended up using it, so I counted it. That's my number 8. How about you?
I strongly considered putting that on my list. I left it off, but I'll explain why a little bit later on.
Okay.
But for my number 8, I went with the keychain that has the explosive, the stun gas, and the lockpick from The Living Daylights, because that's damn useful.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to blow you up there. Yes, that one almost made my list. I did have that among my possibilities that didn't quite make the top 12. Yeah, that was a fun toy, especially when Q was explaining how to use it.
And I like Bond's personalization code, the wolf whistle. But let's face it, lockpicks are useful even if you're not going to use them for bad things. I mean, I only have one key for my car because it's a chip key, and those are damn expensive to get extras of.
Yep.
And having this handy would just be really nice.
It definitely could be. And especially someone in Bond's line of work, he's going to need lockpicks. He's going to need to be able to get access to places where he might not be, quote-unquote, welcome. So anything that can help out with that is definitely going to be beneficial to his cause. And the fact that it also had the explosives and the stun gas or tear gas or whatever was going on in there. Hey, added bonus.
So, and hey, if you lose your keys, you can find them because it's also just the keychain finder.
Yes.
And top 007 of the 007 gadgets. For me, I'm going to finally pick a watch at number 007, and I'm going with the Omega Seamaster Laser Detonator Edition from GoldenEye, and it's specifically because I wanted a watch that had a laser in it that did something else too.
Gotcha.
And so it's like, okay, it's a laser and it's got the detonator, so we're good. This is why I don't have the Moonraker watch that just had the detonator, because we got lasers, and lasers, they're cool! So I had to this list would not have been complete without a laser watch, and so there we go. GoldenEye laser watch. That's my number 007.
I'm going to admit something in advance here. I cheated quite a bit when it came to the watch item on my list, and we'll get to it when we get to it, but I'll admit I cheated because I just couldn't. But I did pick a number 7. And my number 7, again, this is almost for the same reason as my number 9, because it was one of the only gadgets used in this particular movie, and because it was extremely usefully used in the movie, even though it's not super high-tech beyond reality. In fact, it is something that is quite based in reality that we have, everywhere, basically. And that is the radio transmitter device from Skyfall, the latest from Q Branch. A radio. I just thought it was so perfect, not only because, it is a small radio, easily hideable, easily concealed, and it did exactly what it was meant to do. It led them to where he was, which was the point of it that was the point. Bring people to your location. Turn this on. Boom. And it was just so cleverly used that it made my list, even though it's a simple device.
Fair enough. I can understand that. I considered it, but it didn't quite have the sex factor for me. But what about your number 6?
Jumping up to number 6. This, I think, if I double check my list, this might be the only thing that made my list from this particular movie, from either of my lists, as a matter of fact. Yep, it is. This is the only thing. One of the few redeeming factors of this movie, as a matter of fact, was all of the amazing gadgets that were on display, even though they were used kind of as a cop-out because the movie had no plot, no acting, no writing, no direction, no cinematography, no anything else. But at least it had gadgets, and this was my favorite of the gadgets, and that is the sonic disruptor ring thingy, the single-digit sonic agitator from Die Another Day. I like the idea of it because it's just grounded enough in reality. They do have sonic devices that are specifically designed to shatter glass quickly. Not necessarily bulletproof glass, not necessarily designed for big sheets of ice either, but they do have that basic technology has been, in the works. No, it's not small enough to fit into a ring yet. Where's the power source? Come on now. Something like that, you need a large amount of electricity to power it. It's not going to be confined in a ring.
This is going to sound totally politically incorrect. The power source is Bond's big brass balls.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, then in that case, he had enough. He had plenty to go around. But no, I liked that toy. And I especially liked it. It's one of the few times we saw something used more than once throughout the movie. A lot of times you see these gadgets that are specifically designed for one thing, and you see them use it the one time, and then boom, that's it. You're done. He didn't, this one for me, because he did use it twice instead of just once, and because it wasn't overused, it wasn't something he was using every 5 seconds, it worked for me. And again, in such a horrible movie in comparison to the rest of the flicks, got to look for an upside, and for me, that particular toy was the upside.
Very interesting. And the fact that you said something else about it also interests me, but we'll get to that later.
But what do you have at number 6?
At number 6, I have one of the most inconspicuous, basic items, but I also think it's one of the most practical items James Bond ever got. And it's actually a multi-tool type thing because it is the briefcase from Love.
The briefcase?
The one that has the tear gas, the one that has the commando knives, the one that has 50 gold sovereigns.
Yes.
So it's a very, very useful item.
Extremely
and something
versatile.
I would happily carry around with me, except to an airport.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it had the knife, the throwing knives in the handle area. It had the tear gas if you opened it wrong, and obviously it had the gold to buy off bad guys or whatever you needed. An absolutely very, very useful, very, very cool gadget because it was so multi-purpose and inconspicuous, and you got to see him use basically everything in that particular movie, which is always fun too.
And it has a basis in reality. I mean, it is completely plausible. I would not be surprised if something like this has actually been carried around.
Oh, no,
that's another thing, while we're on that subject, is that the idea of these funky gadgets is not something that Ian Fleming just made up. I mean, they really did use some really odd stuff. Like, there's a very famous gadget that people talk about a lot, where the Soviet KGB used an umbrella with a poisonous tip to kill.
Didn't they use wasn't it a small pellet coated with I believe it was ricin, wasn't it?
A radioactive poisonous pellet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, these type of gadgets, especially, things that normal people would be carrying around. Obviously, they have documented cases of, these different type of all this kind of, spycraft that people have done. And most of it involves cameras. A lot of the smaller camera technology started in the spy realm. You have ways they had special cameras that were designed specifically to take pictures of sheets of paper that had little chains or strings attached. So you had it at just the right height. You put the string on the piece of paper, you hold the camera up so where the string is perfectly straight, and boom, you get exactly the paper. But something like this, a briefcase where you could conceal weaponry is definitely not out of the realm of possibility, especially the simpler things like the knives and hiding money of some sort, some kind of currency in case you get stuck somewhere and you need something that's pretty much good anywhere. And yeah, gold is going to be pretty much good anywhere. You can get local currency for gold just about anywhere in the world. You can go just about anywhere in the world and be like, I have gold, can you give me some of your money?
Yeah, and they'll say, sure.
We'd be glad to. Especially nowadays. I mean, geez, cash for gold places on every damn corner. It's ridiculous. That's a sign of the economy.
A sovereign
right
is
there.
Not something they're going to melt. That's real currency.
Yeah. Well, especially nowadays. Especially now, they'd be like, whoa, that's actually a collectible coin at this point.
Yeah.
But
so that was my number 006, which brings us into the top 5, I believe.
It does. And here's the first surprise of the evening. My original prediction was that we would not have anything on these lists that was close to each other, even by 1 or 2, other than the one item that we'll probably both agree on. And we've already been proven wrong because my number 5 is the briefcase from Russia with Love.
Very nice.
So for all the reasons we just spoke about. Yeah, the briefcase just did crack my top 5, and again, it's just because it was so versatile and yet grounded enough in reality that it's plausible enough to think that that Bond could have something like that. My only disappointment with it whatsoever is kind of my common gripe in some Bond movies where Q explains every single thing that an item can do, and then you see Bond do every single thing that he listed off in the movie, and it's like, okay, we get it. One or the other. Either show us what it can do because he's not going to use it and we want to know, or just show him use it and we'll learn about it then. But even still, it's still a great gadget, and yes, definitely something I'd love to have myself.
Absolutely. Now, my number 5 is probably the single most personal gadget on this list for 007. And it's not something we tend to think of as a gadget, even though he ended up using it as one. And that would be the genuine Felix lighter from License to Kill. which he used to very great effect to exact his revenge upon Sanchez, which is just one of the defining moments for me for the character of 007, and one of the reasons why I can't understand why License to Kill is so underrated, because that's just such a statement moment. And at that point, it's such a statement gadget, especially given the fact that it was a present from his best friend, whom he's now avenging. So I absolutely had to include the Felix lighter on this list, and had to put it at least as high as number 5.
And I came across that one in my studies, and I remembered it. And I'm not quite sure why it didn't make my list. Quite honestly, now that I'm hearing your arguments for it, I'm like, damn, that should be on my list. But no, I completely agree. It was definitely a very personal item, and used to great effect in the film. And again, like you said, a very underrated film for both of those Dalton movies. I thought were really good films. I guess we weren't ready for them. We weren't ready for that kind of Bond just yet, I guess.
Which is odd, especially with License to Kill, because License to Kill finally caught up with the golden age of 80s action. I mean, it was an 80s action movie. That's what it was. But at that point, people kind of just noped out of it, because we were in the summer of Batman and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Lethal Weapon 2 and The Abyss. So, but yeah, very underrated movie.
Yeah. I definitely recommend going back and watching that one if you haven't, or if you haven't watched it in a while. I definitely recommend it. Both of the Dalton films, actually. Go back and watch Living Daylights, too, because both of those were really good.
Absolutely.
So that was
our number 5.
Yes, okay. Making sure I'm caught up.
What about your number 4?
For me, number 4, this is the one that I thought was surprising that you had it so low, and that is the small air breather from Thunderball. That made it all the way up to my number 4. I really like this device, not only because of its somewhat plausibility, but also the fact that it was used to great effect, and the fact that it's been copied so many times. You know something's good when other genres entirely copy what you've done. I mean, even so far as, like you said, sci-fi movies, Star Wars movies have copied this almost exactly. So that's why the breather from Thunderball makes my number 4.
Okay.
Where's your number 4 fall?
My number 4 is definitely not on your list. And I admit, aside from its potential utility, at least one time, this device just makes me laugh. Every time I see this device used, it's just the funniest thing, and I don't know why it's so funny. It's funnier than it has any right to be. And that is the explosive pen that has not quite been perfected yet, Never Say Never Again, which is used to just annihilate Barbara Carrera when she's about to shoot Bond's balls off.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do. I do recall that. Oh man, that was a scene. All right, that was a scene.
It's even got the Union Jack on it.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
You're going to notice my common thread for Never Say Never Again is that these things are amusing.
Yes.
And this one is just too damn amusing. I could not skip this one.
See, for me, that one didn't make the list because it wasn't quite working. Like, I wanted my Bond gadgets to be working 100%. That seemed to me like he just kind of got away with something, but I can understand.
I'd say it worked.
Fine. That's fine.
I think it worked well.
I mean, it did the job, that's for sure. I won't deny that. So, okay, I'll give you that one. That's all right.
Now, for my number 3, I went way more practical.
Okay.
In fact, it is probably the single most practical gadget that Bond has.
Okay.
And it's one that we don't necessarily think of as a gadget, but under these rules, it is. You have seen him with it in just about everything, and that is the Walther PPK. I specifically like the version in Skyfall because I do like the signature gun handprint technology. In fact, I completely support its use in regular weapons. Mm-hmm. But that's something that I think is just so iconically Bond that this list would absolutely not be complete without it. Number 3 is the Walther PK.
Okay. All right. Well, I will admit that I probably would have had that somewhere on my list very high if I had thought of straight up weaponry as being a gadget in this sense. I didn't really classify that myself. I'm not arguing about it. I'm just saying that I didn't think of that.
No, I kind of wondered if you would use this or not. So,
yeah, I thought about it, specifically the one that you're talking about, specifically the Skyfall version with the handprint technology, because that's actually been used twice in the films, that type of technology. And it does actually exist. When the first time it was used, it was purely theoretical, and now it actually does exist. It's not very good yet. It takes too long for the system to recognize the biometrics in order for it to be an effective self-defense weapon. You're sitting there waiting for the thing to recognize your thumbprint or handprint or whatever before it allows you to shoot, and by that point you're overpowered by whoever it is that's trying to overpower you.
But
so
give it 20 more years and we'll have the Judge Dredd version.
Exactly. Well, you will have the... I really like the Continuum version. If you haven't checked out Continuum, you should definitely check that out as well. That one delivers a hell of a stun charge to whoever. It's just somebody who tries to shoot it. That's not the person who's intended as well. So it's very, very cool. But it leaves it usable for the person whose it is to pick it back up and be like, thanks. But no, I totally understand that. For my number 3, I also went extremely practical. I also went extremely realistic somewhat. This is something, again, I included this because it is traditional spycraft. This is actual traditional. This is something that actual spies would use. Maybe not exactly the same way, maybe not hidden exactly the same way, but this is definitely a way that they communicated with each other. And that was the microfilm reader from The Spy Who Loved Me. The combination of the cigarette case and the lighter that were able to make the microfilm reader, whether they would have hit it in that type of thing or not, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is they did use microfilm and microdots to communicate with each other as spies, and so that you would need some way to read those. So that made my number 3, the microfilm reader from Spy Who Loved Me.
Fair enough. And what about your number 2, sir?
Going into number 2, now this is where I cheated. Shamelessly, and I admit this. When I first did my list, I think I had 5 or 6 watches on the list. And I'm like, half my list is watches. This isn't going to work. So my number 2 is the watches. All of them. I
had the same problem. I admit it. I had the same problem.
If I had to pick just one, I don't think I could do it. I would definitely. Your number 7, the one from GoldenEye, was definitely a good one. I like the fact that it did have the transmitter, the detonator for the bombs, as well as having the laser. Even though the graphics department didn't quite know what was going on with whoever was in charge of making Pierce Brosnan point the thing in the right direction didn't quite know where he was supposed to be pointing the thing, because the laser doesn't go anywhere near where it should go from the watch. But that's okay. That's okay. It's a Bond thing. It's all good. But yeah, just all of his watches have had some cool stuff, and even the ones that weren't, gadgetry, that didn't have anything special that we know of, were still cool watches. I mean, he's always had cool watches just from the very beginning. So I couldn't pick just one, so I was like, you know what? To heck with it. I'm throwing the watches in there as my number 2. That blanket covers them all. That's my number 2. I'm a dirty cheater.
You, sir, cheat.
What about your number 2? What clocked in at second best for you?
Now, the funny thing is, I'm kind of cheating as well, and part of this includes a watch. However, I'm not going to say we agreed on this because you went with all the watches. I at least decided to narrow it down to 2 of them for my list.
Okay.
So, I went with the combination gift set of the Seiko watch and Montblanc pen from Octopussy.
Okay.
Where we have the tracking device, the video camera, and the listening device for the bug of which is in the pen of which also squirts acid. So it's just an all-around practical gift set. Fun for the whole family.
You wonder where the acid is contained when you have all the electronics for the camera and the bug and everything else. But at the same time, you don't care.
Write the pen, though.
Yeah, and where's the ink? Oh my gosh. No, that was a cool... Definitely, I considered putting the pen on my list because the acid had me. I mean, just a pen that squirts acid out? Awesome. Especially when he's able to use it to break out of somewhere. Yes. Yes, please. I'll take an acid pen. I will need a super pocket protector that's impervious to whatever acid is in that thing, just to be on the safe side. That's the worst feeling. You're like, oh crap, I got ink on my... Oh my gosh! You don't want your acid pen linking into your shirt pocket. That's no good. We don't want that. But it was a cool toy, so...
And I considered them a single gadget because they are made to work together. So, because in order for the bug that you take out of the pen to work, you actually have to, you can track it with the watch and, that sort of thing. Listen to it through the watch. So I considered it a gift set. So that's how I cheated.
Appropriate
I didn't
for this
go
time
so
of
far
year.
as to say
Okay.
every frickin' watch there is.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Well, do you want to reveal your number one first, or do you want me to?
I will reveal my number one.
All right. What's
And
your numero
in order
uno?
for this to qualify for the list, as I mentioned, it has to be a portable item that Bond himself has to have used. It does not have to have been issued to him in the first place.
Okay.
This item was not issued to him in the first place, and he did use it once.
Okay.
Not very effectively, but he did use it once.
Okay.
And that is the absolute coolest piece of clothing we have ever seen in a James Bond movie, Odd Job's hat.
All right.
I want one. I'm not saying I would use it for evil, but it would be fun. I want Odd Job's hat. And since James Bond himself actually used it once, I had to include it on this list, and it is so cool it trumps every other gadget in a Bond movie. So Odd Job's hat is my number one Bond gadget.
Oh, okay.
From Goldfinger.
Odd Job's hat did make one of my lists, but not this list because I didn't consider him using it per se. It did make my bonus list, which we'll get to in a little bit. But
I figured that would end up happening.
Yeah,
but since Bond himself used it, I figured it qualified.
All right, fair enough. Now, for me, for my number one, this one I had a tough time. I kind of debated back and forth whether to put this on this list or to put this on a different list. And you might argue with me about it. I don't care. I came to the decision that it belonged on this list because it was more portable than it was anything else. And so I decided to include this on the gadgets as opposed to the vehicles. And that is, of course, the jetpack from Thunderball. I
would have included it on the gadget list if I was going to include it at all.
I had to include the jetpack. It had to be included on one list or the other, and I just debated. I was like, you know what? It's not really an enclosed conveyance. It's not something that, I didn't really think of it as transport per se, because you're not going to get long distances in it, but it's too damn cool not to have on the list.
It could go on either way.
So that is what made my number one gadget list, and that is the belt rocket, the Bell rocket belt jetpack from Thunderball. Also briefly seen in a movie we won't talk about. But
it was also used in You Only Live Twice.
Oh, that's right. But I didn't count it from that. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's right.
I can understand it, and I just had a feeling it would be on one of your lists somewhere. I would have put it as a gadget if I was going to use it. I would have understood if it was a vehicle. I'm going to tell you, I didn't use it at all, and the reason I didn't is because it's so cumbersome and impractical. Yes, it was cool.
Oh, it's just too cool.
But I just couldn't include it, but I completely understand it, and I can even completely understand it at number one.
All right.
I couldn't do it, but I understand why you did.
So that completes our top 12 Bond-specific gadgets. Looks like the only ones that we both had on our lists, it only ended up being a couple. We both had the briefcase from Russia with Love. You had it at 6, I had it at 5.
Yep.
You had a watch at number 7. I had all the watches at number 2. And we both had the air breather from Thunderball. You had it at 12, and I had it at 4. Everything else was completely different.
Which I find very interesting, because I had a hard time coming up with this list. Because there were so many things that I thought were cool that I can't count it. Or, like, okay, it was there, but it didn't strike me as interesting at the time. So, again, this is one of the fun reasons we have two hosts.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we want to jump into the bonus gadget lists?
Let's jump into the bonus gadget lists. And for those of you still playing at home, hopefully there's lots of you, the bonus gadgets are defined as gadgets that Bond himself never used.
Yes, these could be bad guys' gadgets. These could be gadgets that were seen in Q's laboratory being tested, that were not used by Bond himself. Anything that we see in action.
On him?
Yeah, against him, on him, near him, by him, but not by him. You know, by him as in nearby, not by him as in physically, but you know what I mean. Anyways.
Yeah.
This list, we only chose 5 bonus gadgets. So my number 5 was probably, I don't know if you would consider this offensive or not. Some people might, but I found it hilarious. and that is the Ghetto Blaster from The Living Daylights.
I am not going to fault you for that.
I died laughing when I first saw that. The guy walking around with the boombox on his ear, and then I lost it. I absolutely lost it. So I absolutely had to consider that one on my list, even though, obviously Bond never used it. Nobody else ever used it. We only ever saw it in the lab, but it was hilarious and cool enough. And just the fact that they called it a Ghetto Blaster, it had to be on my list. So that's my number 5. How about you? What's your number 5?
For it, one of Q's funniest lines. Totally get it. My number 5, which I bet you're thinking I would have higher on this list, especially for all the enthusiasm I have shown about it every time we've talked about them. And this, of course, would be Zomji lasers! Pew, pew, from pew! Moonraker.
I strongly considered putting those...
actually never fired one. I thought back and no, he never fired one. Everyone else did, but he never fired one of the portable ray guns. So it had to be a bonus gadget, and they're just so damn funny.
I almost considered putting that on my main Bond gadget list with the rationalization that it was a playable item in the GoldenEye video game, but then I decided not to.
I would have given you a foul for that one, because we had very specific parameters here.
But no, that one didn't make my bonus list either, because once I started making my bonus list, I found so many other cool things that Bond didn't use himself. So I totally understand, though. And that was, at one point, it was on my papers as to be considered, and I just couldn't fit it in with everything else that I had. So I totally get it. Pew, pew, pew.
Yes, and to me, the name of that thing will always be Zomji Laser, spelled with a Z.
Of course. How else are you going to spell it?
Well, so properly it's with an S, but...
Yeah, whatever. So what did you have clocking in at number 4 on the bonus gadgets?
Keeping up with the same theme, laser from Goldfinger.
The super laser.
Was the first time that an actual practical laser ever appeared in a motion picture. It wasn't something that was a sci-fi ray gun or anything, but something that was based on a real, honest-to-goodness laser.
Yes.
First time ever it showed up in a motion picture. And it was used ironically in that movie on more than one occasion, because not only do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die! But you also got, of course, that's how they break into Fort Knox.
Yes.
So I could not, in good conscience, make this list without including Goldfinger's laser. So that is my number 4 bonus gadget.
All right, I totally understand that its inclusion on this list, and you'll find out why in a little bit. But my number 4 was actually the Poison Dagger Shoe in From Russia with Love. And of course it appeared in other films as well, and not just Bond films. The idea of a hidden dagger the spring-loaded dagger blade in a shoe has been something that has been used in many other films and television shows from here on out. And it's just so cool. Just the idea of just having a hidden dagger in your shoe that just the right foot press or whatever releases and there it is. And of course adding poison to the tip, making a good thing better. You know what I'm saying? So that's my number 4. I do know
what you're saying. It would have been number 6 on my list if we made this a top 6. I totally get that.
Yeah, I love the dagger shoe, and especially, like I said, its permeation into pop culture really sold it for me, because it is something that didn't just appear in this movie. It did actually extend beyond that. Other people said, hey, that's a cool idea, I'm going to use that. So number 4 for me is the dagger shoe.
Excellent choice. What about your number 3, sir?
My number 3 was Odd Job's hat. I hadn't considered Bond actually using it, so I didn't really think about it in that sense, but it's way too cool not to be on one of the lists. It has to be on a list. Odd Job's hat, and really, even now thinking about it, even knowing that, okay, yeah, I remember now Bond did use it the once, I still think it's better as a bonus, personally, just because Odd Job put it to so much better use. Odd Job was the one who used it properly several times, and so to consider it anything other than Odd Job's hat, I can't do it. So for me, number 3 is Odd Job's hat from Goldfinger.
Fair enough. For me, number 3 is something that not everyone would consider a gadget, but I would argue that the manner in which it is used qualifies as something almost gadgetorious, and I do not mean to be sacrilegious to certain individuals when I say so. And I would also argue that Bond never used this because the one he used was something that he constructed himself and was fake. So my number 3 gadget is Solitaire's Tarot deck from Live and Let Die.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a gadget. I understand why you would think that people would not, because I would not. But that being said, I get it. It was definitely used very well in the film. It was definitely an integral part of the plot. It was necessary to push that along. So I get it. I don't know that it would be that, even if I did include it on any of my lists, I don't know that it would be that high. But I get it. I can allow it. I'll allow it.
Very good.
Like I'm in charge here.
Yeah, I just thought it rated so high on Bondinosity, and it was just so interesting. And in fact, the style deck that she used, the Rider Tarot deck, ended up becoming much more popular because of that.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I don't mean to offend anyone for whom a tarot deck has religious or otherwise, metaphysical significance. It's, in fact, I'm honoring it here. So, yes, number 3 for me is Solitaire's Tarot deck.
All right. What about
my number 2 bonus gadget?
Yes.
Is absolutely one of the most iconic gadgets there is. In fact, it made it into the title of a film, and it is the Golden Gun from The Man with the Golden Gun.
This is another one that I very strongly considered putting on my list, and then it just barely didn't make it. But yes, I totally get that. It was a cool device, the way that it was put together with hidden objects so that you could transport it easily, get it on planes, things like that. But I felt ultimately the reason it didn't make my list was because its power was more derived from Scaramanga's ability more than the actual device itself. Other than that, it was just a zip gun that happened to be made out of gold. But I get it. Tell me more about why you picked the Golden Gun specifically.
One, the cool factor. It is a gold gun, and it is made out of a cigarette lighter, a pen, and other items, and it's just so it's very well put together, well thought out, and just how excellently it was used in the film. I mean, obviously it's part of the title, but it's one of the few things that they did right in that movie, I thought, was the portrayal of not just Scaramanga, but the Golden Gun itself as an almost mythical item above and beyond the character of Scaramanga. That this gun was somehow that special, that cool, that amazing. And so, in fact, going with our theme of Bond's toys, the original teaser poster for The Man with the Golden Gun featured a Christmas present from 007, and it showed how it was put together. So I thought that was kind of cool. So and we'll be discussing poster art of James Bond in a later show.
Yes.
So bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen.
Dum, dum, dum.
But so my number 2 choice for bonus gadget is the Golden Gun.
The Golden Gun. Now, I did like the Golden Gun in the GoldenEye video game. Going back to that for just a second, because it was a gun that weapon gave you instant kill shot. It didn't matter if you were shooting somebody who normally took more than one hit to take down. Didn't matter if you hit him in the leg or the arm. One shot, kill. The only problem was you only got the one shot. Then you had to discard the gun. You couldn't reload it. Whereas with the Moonraker laser, if you picked that up in GoldenEye, the video game, that was a one-shot kill also, but you got a lot more shots with it before it ran out of juice.
That's because it's a zombie laser.
Pew, pew, pew. Heck yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Speaking of lasers, my number 2 bonus gadget is the Goldfinger laser, the super laser from Goldfinger. And for all the reasons that you mentioned, not only was it the first time something like that had been portrayed in film, where it was an actual technology being put to use, but it was also one of the best examples of a Bond villain being caught monologuing. You know, that whole thing. I love that. I absolutely love that. It's so Bond, and it's so perfect, and it just kind of defines all the Bond movies after that. So it had to be included on the list. And obviously Bond didn't himself use it, so it couldn't be included on his list, but it had to be on the list. So my number 2 bonus gadget is the super laser from GoldenEye.
Fair enough.
Are you prepared to reveal your number... Wait, have you revealed your number 2 yet?
Yeah, that was the Golden Gun.
Confused.
So it's now time for you to reveal your number 1.
My number 1. And again, I may have cheated just a little bit, but I'm going to allow it.
How kind of you.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? My number 1 bonus gadget, and this is just because this made my list, and this had to be number 1 on my list because it is quintessentially Bond. You see a Bond movie, you almost feel let down if you don't see this appear somewhere in the movie. It's never used directly by Bond per se. It's usually a bad guy's toy. Sharks, man. Sharks, sharks, sharks. Everywhere sharks. Everybody's got sharks. And I love it. The bad guys always have a shark-infested pool or piranhas, whatever. But sharks, man. The only thing that would be better if they had sharks with frickin' laser beams on their head. But no. My number one bonus gadget, sharks. I expect to catch flack. Go ahead.
I could throw chum your way, but I'm going to allow it. I understand. I would never have put that on the list as a gadget, but I completely get why you did. And so, okay, fine. We'll go with it. Sharks.
Sharks. I just love it. I mean, like I said, they play such an integral part. They're in so many of the films. Obviously, the whole thing with Felix, the sharks played an integral part in that whole drama there. So that's why it made the list for me, and I expected to catch some hell for it, but that's my choice. How about you? Number one bonus gadget. Give it to me.
My number one bonus gadget is something that you could use to take out some sharks, especially if they were rocking. It's something we're building from the Americans. It's called a ghetto blaster.
I knew it could not be on your list. I was like, how does this...
It's the funniest line he ever said.
The Ghetto Blaster. Yes. Oh, I love the Ghetto Blaster. It's fantastic.
It's just freaking awesome. In fact, way back when I was playing with some DJ equipment, and I actually used that as the key portion of a remix that I did. That's how I ended it, is I had the sound effect of the explosion in that line. I mean, the Ghetto Blaster is just freaking cool. It's totally 80s. It's a blast. Hardy har har. It's fun. And that line is what totally... So... For me, as soon as we thought of a gadget episode, I knew this was going to be at the top of some list somewhere. I love this gadget. And extra bonus trivia for you. When they set off the special effect for the Ghetto Blaster to fire, the gentleman who actually pressed the button for it to fire from off camera was Prince Charles.
Oh, that's right. I read somewhere that he was involved in something somewhere, and I didn't remember exactly what it was. That's amusing.
So yes, my number one bonus gadget is a Ghetto Blaster, which you could fire while you're wearing Oddjob's hat.
Absolutely. If you want to look good while you're doing it, shoot it at a shark.
Yes. But only if Solitaire's Tarot deck says it's okay.
Yeah, and you should be wearing dagger shoes just on the off chance that the Ghetto Blaster doesn't work and they get close enough to you for you to kick them with your poison tip shoes.
Yeah, and, you can carry your stuff in a briefcase.
Yeah.
Including a huge watch collection.
You could throw your huge watch collection and your golden gun, along with your exploding grenade pen and your sonic ring. Boom, right in the briefcase. Don't forget your radio.
Felix Leiter. And you could be wearing your X-ray glasses. You realize almost all of this can be carried at once? I mean, really, if it weren't for the lasers, you can carry all of this at the same time.
Pretty much, yeah. I think the super laser is the least portable of the items.
But it is portable because we saw it move.
Yes, absolutely. So. Yeah, that's why I counted it. I was like, all right, they moved it. It's portable.
Really, you can carry all of this on your person at the same time. You look kind of funny with that many watches on, but,
Throw something in the case. It's all good. It's all good. Although I don't know how you carry the sharks around. Damn it.
Well,
strap one of them to a jetpack.
So.
Strap one of them to the jetpack. Shark in a jetpack. Huh? The next movie from Sci-Fi. You survived Sharknado.
I follow Roger Corbin on Twitter, and he's tweeted Stranger Things. So
you survived Sharknado, but will you survive Shark in a Jetpack? Dum dum dum.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to do that. Let's not give them any ideas. All right. So that does it for the gadgets, huh?
Gadget section of the Bonds Toys episode. And now we're going to be moving on to the vehicular section of the Bonds Toys episode, unless you've got a couple more gadgetory toys you want to mention. Or?
No, I think we pretty well covered it. Everything, between what you had on your list and what I had on my list, I think we covered everything that I really wanted to get to. So I think we're ready to move on to the conveyances.
All right, so we're going to do this in the same kind of format. We're going to start with the dumbest vehicle, and then we're going to go with the top 15 Bond vehicles, and then 3 bonus vehicles. So we end up with a total of 1 more item on the vehicle list.
What are you going to do? So,
well, I'm going to start with my dumbest vehicle.
What is your dumbest vehicle?
If you haven't predicted this, I will be shocked. And I know I'm going to get argument for it. I mean, yeah, it would be cool if it were real, but for bonding necessity and for, I just want to throw a drink at the screen every time I see this stupid-ass thing, it's the Vanish from Die Another Day. This is where the sharks that we just talked about got jumped. They got jumped more effectively than if they ran into a great white hooker. I mean,
they were jumped quite significantly. They were jumped, and they were even swimming around in ice, which I don't even know how they do that, but somehow, some way. Now, here's the thing. I didn't want to list this as the dumbest vehicle because there were other cars that he was in that was just, they were just plain cars or anything. But as far as like a specialized Bond vehicle that was also dumb as bricks, I too chose the Vanish.
Holy crap!
Now don't get me wrong.
Like it?
Don't get me wrong. I do. I love it. It was probably.
You said it was the best part of the movie.
That's how bad the movie was. But no. The point is,
I expected this to be near the top of your list.
No, this one did not make the list. Actually, other than that, the dumbest. It's just because it was too far fetched. The whole the tracking shotguns, everything that it had, and then of course the adaptive camouflage, which I will say is based on real technology. But it only works very limitedly and only on stationary objects. It cannot update fast enough to do a moving vehicle, even one going very slowly. They've done tests with tanks and things like this with this type of technology. The idea of having cameras on one side of the vehicle that project what's on the other side on the front side. It only works, first of all, it only works at very specific angles of view because you have to be looking at it right on. And then as soon as you start moving, it's really obvious because even with a split-second delay of the camera changing, you can see it. It's ripply and it's obvious. But if you want to just hide one object stationary from one particular point of view, it does work. But for a moving vehicle, no, it was just a dumb idea. What I liked about the car was all the other cool stuff it had, and the fact that we got to see a supercar fight. That's what I really liked about it, was the fact that the bad guy had a supercar too. It wasn't just Bond with a supercar running away from a bunch of regular cars. It was Bond and another Bond-like car having it out together. That's why I thought that was the best part of the movie. But again, we're talking about the best part of a pretty awful movie. So...
You have shattered my expectations, sir. I now expect us to agree on one more thing.
That's I was shocked. I had an inkling that maybe this would make the list, but I wasn't sure if there were some other ones. I still think I still doubt we're going to have any other agreements up until the one that we're thinking that we're going to agree on. But hey, who knows?
I don't think so either, but I think we're going to agree on one of them.
All right, so that does it for dumbest. We both agree that the Austin Martin calls it a vanquish. We call it the Vanish. Oh, come on now. That was a horrible line. I mean, it wasn't even a good pun. It was just a bad pun. And it
was a bad pun, and I've got to put it this way at least once: the car's just fucking stupid. So that's the dumbest vehicle. Now let's move on to the top 15 Bond vehicles. And remember, we're talking vehicles in this list that Bond himself has actually driven. Doesn't have to have been issued to him originally. He just has to have driven, piloted, basically somehow operated the vehicle.
Right.
And we can stretch the definition of vehicle a little bit, but it can't be a vehicle so big that it's a location. So the Orient Express does not count, and besides, he didn't drive it. So
I didn't even try to count the Orient Express. There is one on my list that you might have issue with because it was fairly large, but I still say it was a vehicle that he operated. So we'll get to it when we get to it. But so this is a top 15 list. First of all, we're starting at number 15. Do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
My first pick on this list, so at number 15, it's kind of low on the bonding necessity scale, just for the fact that it wasn't really used to decent effect in the movie that it was in. Mm-hmm. However, it is also the one and only of all of these vehicles that I have personally been in.
Oh, okay.
And I can tell you, it feels like a frickin' Bond car.
Okay.
and that is the BMW Z3 convertible from GoldenEye.
I came this close to including that on my list. It ended up being scratched only because it spent so little time on screen in that movie. He barely even drove the thing. I like the car. I really do like the car. And the Z4 was horrible. Like, I don't know what they did. The Z3 was beautiful. It was a nice looking car. It was like, it looked kind of Mazda Miata-ish, but like a high-end, like classy Miata. You know what I mean?
And the color scheme was just perfect, because the one I wrote in also had the exact color scheme. Oh, okay. It was a perfect copy. It was, in fact, that edition. So
wow. Yeah, no, I can definitely see that being.
And I admit, it's only on this list because I wrote in it, and it was so damn cool that I had to. Even though it was used so ineffectively, I had to use it.
Yeah, that was one of those things that everybody made a big stink of, he's not driving an Austin this movie. Oh my gosh, they brought Bond back, but he's driving a BMW, blah, blah. Okay, whoever bought the rights to the product placement, get over it, move on. But then it was on screen for less than 2 minutes total? And Bond really didn't do a whole lot of driving in it, but he did.
And he let Wade have it.
Yeah, he's like, here you go.
How freaking dumb could you be? Yeah, that's such a beautiful car to leave in the hands of that loud-ass redneck.
Don't push any of the buttons in that car. He gave him a warning at least. But no, I can totally see why that made your list for that reason, and that's the reason it didn't make my list. It just barely didn't make my list, and that's because the screen time was so low on it. But otherwise, it probably would have made my list. It probably would have bumped off my number 15, which I'm going to guess this one did not make your list. And this one only made my list, again, because I have such fond memories of that particular movie, and because I felt that it was an example of Bond doing the best he could with what he had available. And that was can't talk today, but that was the Citroen 2CV from For Your Eyes Only, the car that he had to get into and drive because his Lotus Esprit had been blown up by its own security system.
And they did that on purpose, just to they did that on purpose because after Moonraker, it was decided that he'd gone too gadget heavy, so they wanted to prove that he could be Bond without the sexy car. Yeah. So they gave him the least sexy thing they could possibly come up with.
The thing looks like a VW Bug, basically. It's not. It's a Citroen, which makes it even worse than a VW Bug. But again, he does so well with it. It's such an amazing car chase, such an amazing scene that I had to include it on the list, even though it's not really a Bondy type car necessarily, but just it's a perfect example of what Bond can do even when he doesn't have his gadgets. So that's why it made my list, even though it is all the way down at number 15.
I'm not going to argue against you, and if that's what you're apologizing for, then we're going to have fun with this list. So what's your number 14, sir?
Number 14 for me was the Chevrolet Bel Air from Dr. No. And this one only made the list because it was the first car we see Bond driving in a film. For me, this one had to be on the list somewhere. It didn't quite make it all the way down to the bottom, but very nearly. But just for nostalgia's sake, just for the fact that, so many people bitch and moan, he has to drive an Aston Martin. He has to drive an Aston Martin. That's the only thing. No, the first car he ever drove on film was a frickin' Chevy. So calm down, people. Okay?
Yeah.
It wasn't a special car. Didn't really do anything. But it was the first thing we ever see Bond driving. So for me, that's my number 14.
And that's fair enough. I can't fault you for it. It's not on my list, but it was one that I considered.
All right. Well, what is your number 14?
My number 14 is Q's boat from The World Is Not Enough. Conveniently parked somewhere around the 6th floor of MI6, yet somehow has a way to get out onto the River Thames anyway.
Q likes to be prepared. He could go on vacation or retire at any moment and needs to be able to immediately take off with the boat that he designed that somehow the government was going to let him have with all the special... But no, I do not fault you for that choice in any way, shape, or form.
It's just a Bondish vehicle, and it was used very well. Yes. In fact, the scene in which it submerges was come up with by accident because the engine was so powerful that it actually submerged without them realizing it was going to, and they decided to write that into the film. But
oops!
It's just such a fun little boat.
We like that. So. It very much was. I definitely enjoyed that. The Q boat was very, very well done and very effective. So kudos to that choice.
That's my number 14, and coming in at lucky number 13. And this this is, again, one of those things where it's mainly an amusement factor, and that would be the XJ50 turbo motorcycle. And the reason for that is we got to see Sean Connery on a crotch rocket. I mean, yeah, it's not the full-on Kawasaki Ninja, but it's just Bond's been on so many motorcycles.
Yes.
And they're usually piece of crap, dirt bikes, things like that. This is the one time we see him get on a sexy bike and just let her rip. And it's got a front bumper, for crying out loud. Like, how can you not like this? So, old Sean Connery on a crotch rocket. That's why I had to pick the Yamaha motorcycle from Never Say Never Again.
Okay. I'll give you that one. I honestly, I was kind of surprised when I went through my list. I don't believe, I'm just going to double check real quick. I don't think any of the motorcycles, nope, none of the motorcycles made my list, surprisingly. There were a couple that were on my consideration list, but none of them made my full-time list. For me, my number 13, this is an interesting one because, well, it was just too cool not to include on the list. And I don't know if he was actually officially piloting it or not. It might have been an automatic of some sort, but the iceberg submarine. You gotta love a submarine disguised as an iceberg with a full bar, caviar, and a giant bed. There's nothing more Bond than that. So my number 13
completely understand
is the iceberg submarine. That's what clocked in number 13 for me. It was just too. Yes, it was a cheesy thing. It was meant to be the ending scene. It wasn't anything like major plot point or anything like that. But it was just so Bond. It's one thing disguised as something else. But then also he's got champagne and caviar and a giant bed, and of course, we're going to be here for quite some time. So,
yeah, it's a 4-day trip back.
Yes, absolutely. So that's my number 13. So that brings us up to number 12. What did you have in the number 12 spot?
At number 12, From A View to a Kill. Even though the best parts of the use of this vehicle involve someone else driving, Bond did drive it for a little while. So, a fire engine.
This one almost made my list too. I did almost. That was one of the ones that was on my consideration list. The San Francisco City fire truck, specifically a ladder truck, if I recall.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just seeing a fire truck, especially a ladder truck, the biggest of the fire trucks involved in a car chase through downtown San Francisco. Fantastic.
And believe me, if you've ever driven through downtown San Francisco, it's harrowing in an economy car. So.
Yeah, that was definitely fun. I didn't include it on my list, but it was on my considerations because, yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, it's just such an iconic, awesome chase. I could not leave it off the list. So, a San Francisco fire engine. That's my number 12.
All right. My number 12 clocks in because, first of all, it's just a sexy beast. This car is definitely on the top of my list of cars I would probably actually buy if I ever won the lottery. Obviously, it wouldn't have all the Bond toys because laws and stuff, whatever. But also because this car was one of the absolutely most brilliant crash scenes we've ever seen in a Bond film, and that's the Aston Martin DBS from Casino Royale. We also see it briefly in Quantum of Solace. I doubt it's the same one, considering how much damage happened in Casino Royale.
Yeah, that looked pretty well totaled when we saw it in Casino Royale.
If I recall, they set a record on number of flips, or number of rolls.
And I believe that was an unintentional record.
Yes, it was. They had tried many different ways they wanted the car to roll, but the car was built so well they could not get it to roll. They finally actually had to put an explosive charge with a piston, basically, that went off right when the car went over it to push it and to get it to roll over, because every other time, he pulled off on the side of the road and he whatever spun out, but couldn't roll the car. The stunt driver could not roll that car. So they finally made it happen, and oh my gosh, did they make it happen spectacularly. So for me, and again, like I said, it's just a damn sexy car. It's a beautiful car. Astons are so well built to begin with, but I mean oh yes, I would definitely want one of those if I had the money to buy one. So that's what clocked in at number 12 for me. It's the DBS from Casino Royale.
outstanding choice. It's not on my list, but outstanding choice. And what about your number 11, sir?
Jumping up to number 11, we're going to stick with the Aston Martin theme, and that would be the Volante from The Living Daylights. Again, beautiful, sexy car, and just what I loved about it was it had so much of the cool stuff that we saw from previous Bond cars just kind of upgraded to that 80s sensibility. And so I really enjoyed that car, although it didn't see a ton of action comparatively.
I thought it saw some decent action.
I just loved that car. And again, it's a beautiful car. It's definitely, again, if I won the lottery, had multi-million dollars to spend, something like this, one of these older Volantes, I would definitely want to purchase as well. So that's what clocked in at number 11.
Okay. My number 11, I promised we'd get back to this sometime. It's just I included it as part of a set, and that would be the BMW 750iL from Tomorrow Never Dies with the phone remote control.
Absolutely.
Because I considered the remote control part and parcel to the car because it controls the car. And it's just such a cool idea. James Bond being able to remote control the car so he can then drive it from the back seat. I mean, some of the gadgets in the car are just ridiculous. Like the little buzzsaw that just happens to be able to come up so it can cut a wire only if you stretch it at a certain height.
Which, like, I'm still trying to figure out what that wire would actually do to the car if it didn't have the saw. Wouldn't it just go over the hood? I mean, the worst case scenario, you lose your antenna. That's what I'm thinking happens if they didn't have that buzzsaw. Maybe if it hit it just hard enough, if that wire was pulled just tight enough, maybe you scratch the windshield. But yeah, that was a little ridiculous. But I won't fault you for that choice at all.
It's just such a fun scene, and it is a nice car, and a disagreeable voice that yells at Bond, "Please fasten seatbelt." It's just like, you know, your standard German dominatrix voice, except made just a little bit more pleasant. It's just a fun car, and it's so very Bond. So
it really is.
I had to include it.
Absolutely, and I will not fault you for that whatsoever. In fact, if we want to go ahead and jump into my number 10 spot, that would be the BMW 750iL from Dies.
Second time we've done this.
Yeah, it was just one off right there. Yeah, that was my number 10 spot, is that same car. And again, for the same reasons, because it had all the cool gadgets that it needed to have. Yes, it did have a little bit too much. The wire cutter was just a little over the top. That almost, why? That last thing, you just didn't need that. Because that was just impossible to think, okay, first of all, what is a wire going to do to a car? Yes, a person maybe, like somebody riding on a motorcycle, yeah, they're going to need to watch out for that. A car? No. It's a wire. It's going to flex over the top of the car. Who cares? But the fact that it had the remote control built into a phone, the fact that he was able to use it so well, the fact that it had, that it was used to such comic effect in that it was locked down so tight that they couldn't even get into it with a machine gun at the windows and sledgehammers and everything else. They could not get into this car to get what he was hiding in it. It was just a fun vehicle, and it was used to great effect in that particular film. So that's why it had to be on my list, and very nearly the same position as yours.
All right. Now, my number 10, I have to confess, I don't particularly like this vehicle. I don't know why. I mean, it's cute and all, but I just don't particularly like it. However, on the Bondi Necessity scale, it's iconic. And someone would probably want to beat us with rubber chickens if this was not included on the list.
Okay.
So my number 10 is Little Nelly, the helicopter from You Only Live Twice. The one that was exhaustively explained so that we could make sure that we used every single frickin' weapon on it possible.
Yes, it was. But at the same time, I did not have a problem with that forever because, quite frankly, it's a helicopter that can be broken down into a briefcase. And not only that, it was real. I mean, granted, yes, they added weapons and stuff for it that weren't on the real thing. But this was a real thing. The guy flew it around. Guy went on shows and did tricks and stuff with this, even including shooting at cars on the ground from the thing. And in fact, it was eventually destroyed when the guy crashed it. The guy who built it was at an air show, crashed it, walked away from the crash, but Little Nelly, unfortunately, was destroyed in that crash. But the pilot walked away. So I do not fault you whatsoever for including Little Nelly on your list. The only thing I fault you for is for having it so low. Number 10?
It's just because it just never grabbed me. I mean, like I said, it's cute. I should like it. I mean, but it just never grabbed me.
All right.
So that's why it's my number 10.
But number 10 is, hey, number 10 is better than not at all, and so I'm glad that it's there. So what comes in at number 9 for you?
Number 9, I expect a little bit of argument for.
Uh-oh.
Because, I mean, like I said, if you were apologizing for something else before, I really went off the tracks for this one.
Okay.
However, I'm going to argue that it was used as a vehicle and Bond drove it.
Okay.
And Bond drove it in one of the best scenes we've seen. And you could sit in it, so it wasn't like a pair of skis or anything. No, it was a cello case from The Living Daylights.
Don't forget that he actually used the cello as a rudder for
a
that.
Stradivarius cello, no less.
Yes. Wow, I cannot believe that you would put a cello case on the list of vehicles for James Bond. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that whatsoever. Wait, I can, actually. I can very much believe it. That's your number 9, huh?
That's my
number 10. Number 10. Oh, no, yeah, that's your number 9. Okay. That was just a fun scene. I mean, just seeing him slide, using the cello case essentially as a toboggan, with the Stradivarius cello, no less, as the rudder to. But it was a fantastic scene. It was absolutely, utterly brilliant, and it was definitely a very good use. And another example of why that movie is so underrated. It's one of those scenes where, yes, it's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in a Bond way. It's not ridiculous in any other way. It would not fit in any other movie unless it was like a slapstick type of action movie. But for a Bond movie, it fits, and you can still have a serious movie around that scene and still have it work. It's fantastic. Speaking of ridiculous...
It's a very serious movie, in fact. But it's just... That scene was so great. I love it. I had to.
It really was. Now, for me, for my number 9, cracking into single digits, that was the AMC Hornet. And only because of that fantastic jump, taken in one shot, being able to... And actually, that fantastic corkscrew, twisty jump. Anytime you put something like that on film, it's going to be memorable. And when you remember something like that, it's like, yeah, there was nothing special about the car. I mean, he stole it off the lot. It wasn't even a Bond car, but that jump, man, that jump. So that's why it came in at number 9 for me.
I can completely understand. I considered it. It's just that sound effect has ruined that car for me for all time. And yeah, I understand. I just couldn't go there.
Yeah, but that jump, I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. And the man with the golden gun. And, of course, the fact that they actually did that with that type of car. Yes, it was modified, of course. Suspension and wheel wells different and different tires,
but
blah, 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 blah.
Done for real in one take.
Yes.
No optical trickery, no computer effects, no nothing.
Yeah, that
no
wasn't
wires.
CGI. That was an actual car jumping over an actual space, twisting around and flipping around and just being brilliant. So
and
that's
it's something you will never see again in motion pictures because, of course, now they would do that CGI.
Yes. Why risk a stuntman in a car, when you can pay somebody to sit in front of a computer and make it?
Yeah, so I didn't put it on my list, but I totally understand why you did.
So what clocked in at number 8 for you then?
At number 8, you really didn't have to apologize because I put in the Citroen 2CV from For Your Eyes Only because that scene was just freaking awesome. And as you noted, it proved that Bond could do it no matter what he was driving. It's just this little dumpy-ass car that makes a VW Bug look like a racer. Yeah, I know, Herbie was a racer. But still, and it just awesome chase. I just love that scene, and I love the fact that he did it in such an old beater.
Yes.
So there's no way I could have this on the list. In fact, I'm kind of surprised it ended up as low as it did, but there's just so much good stuff. So I put in the Citroen 2CV from For Your Eyes Only at number 8.
All right. Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad that it made your list. My number 8 was one that you already mentioned as well, and that is, of course, the Q-Boat from The World Is Not Enough. For all the same reasons you mentioned, it's just absolutely a fantastic boat, to be sure. I mean, just a fun racing boat to begin with. But then the fact that it was supposed to be Q's retirement vehicle, he was going to take it when he retired, and the fact that it was on the 6th floor of the building, but yet still had an easy way out onto the river. Everything about that boat was Bond. And since no other boats actually made my list, I had to have a boat on here somewhere. And that's the one that made the list, was the Q-boat at number 8.
Fair enough. And what about number 007?
Number 007 for me. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get any arguments from you about this one, but I chose something a little bit unconventional. And that was...
I picked a cello case, man. So, how much more unconventional are you going to get?
I would say equally unconventional. In fact, I would say exactly equally unconventional, because I would say it's the cello case from The Living Daylights. That's what I have in my number 7. That was just such a great scene, seeing him sledding down the mountain in a cello case, using the frickin' cello as a rudder, getting away from the bad guys. It was a fantastic scene. It was great. It was action-packed, but it was also just enough comic relief that movie needed just a little bit. And it was just perfect. And so I was wondering if I was going to catch hell for that, but then you put it in at your number 9. So, but that is my number 7, the cello case from Living Daylights.
Can't fault you for it at all. In fact, if I had to come up with this list in a week, who knows? I might put it there too, because these things are fluid. But my number 7 is a much more traditional vehicle.
Okay.
Though it's not something you tended to see James Bond in once, but when you did, it was one of the more iconic chase scenes. From your favorite movie, GoldenEye, a Soviet T-80B tank. It was actually a T-55 redressed to look like a T-80B, but still, it's a Soviet tank. James Bond plays chicken with a frickin' train using the tank.
Yes. Oh, yes. That scene was freaking fantastic. Like, I love car chases, and of course every Bond movie has to have a car chase of some type. GoldenEye had a freaking tank chase. It was amazing. So I don't fault you for that whatsoever, other than why so low? That's the only question. But no, I totally get that. So that was your that's 7, right?
Yep, that was my 007.
I get so confused so easily. What about number 6? That's 6.
Number 6 was
Spanish.
One of the stars of one of the more iconic opening sequences from a James Bond movie ever, and it's just so damn cute. And that would be the horse trailer plane from Octopussy.
The horse trailer plane from Octopussy, which I believe was an Aerostar BDST. Don't ask me how I know that. It's not like it's written down on my list or anything, but
no, not at all. I knew it had to be on your list somewhere.
Oh, it had to be. It was just fantastic.
Such an important scene and just so much fun.
Yes, and much like Little Nelly, it's Bond flying around in a tiny little aeronautical vehicle of some sort, and it's fantastic. So no, I don't fault you for your placement there whatsoever. That's a good choice for number 6.
And what is your number 6?
My number 6 was the amphibious Lotus Esprit from The Spy Who Loved Me. I love this car. A Lotus Esprit is definitely another one of those cars that I would buy if I won the lottery and had unlimited funds to buy all sorts of fun cars. I would definitely buy an 80s Lotus. But this one was, of course, extra special because not only did it run on the roads, but it also dove underwater and acted as a submarine complete with torpedoes and everything.
And anti-aircraft missiles.
Of course. How are you not going to put those on your sub car, whatever? Yes, and just the scene with him coming out of the water onto the beach, holding the fish out the window. I mean, it's so ridiculous, but at the same time, so Bond. It's just, so for me...
And Roger in that. Tubby Broccoli didn't like it until he's in the dailies, and it's just so cool.
It's just so Bond for him to do something like that. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, because it's like, wait a minute, if there was water in the car, if the fish got in the car, wouldn't they be all wet? It's not a good submarine if they're wet because they're drowning. I don't but it's funny, and that's the point.
Yes.
So for me, number 6 is the amphibious Lotus from The Spy Who Loved Me.
Well, funny you should say that, because my number 5 is the Lotus Esprit from The Spy Who Loved Me.
We're actually quite a bit closer on some of these than I honestly thought we were going to be, so that's kind of cool.
For all the reasons that you said, it's an iconic Bond car. It's one of the first 2 or 3 that anyone thinks of when you say James Bond car.
Yeah.
And it's just such a fun vehicle. And yeah, it is a C car. It's just a great vehicle. So yeah, I had to pick the Lotus Esprit for me as my number 5. So 1 off from you. One higher than you. So what did you pick for number 5?
For me, number 5, The moon buggy. Diamonds are forever. Frickin' moon buggy. Come on now. It's a moon buggy.
I thought about it, but I couldn't.
It's a moon buggy. He's driving around in a moon buggy. He even loses a wheel somehow. But I couldn't not include this. I was just like, it's so much fun. Basically, it's just a dune buggy that's driving around in the sand. But the fact of the matter is, it was supposed to be a moon rover that the astronauts would be driving around on the moon, and here he is crashing around the desert in a chase. And it's such a fun scene, and it's such a great action sequence, and it's Bond in a moon buggy, for crying out loud. It had to be on my list.
It is Bond in a moon buggy. It's kind of like you could almost picture that meme where it's James Bond moon buggy. Your argument is invalid. Kind of like, this is a cat pushing a watermelon out of a lake. Your argument is invalid.
Exactly. James Bond in a moon buggy. Yeah, I totally get that. I totally understand, and that's why it made my top 5. So what made your top 4?
My number 4 is the affectionately named Bondola from Moonraker. That would be the gondola, which suddenly turns into a speedboat, which then turns into a parade float that you can drive, which causes even pigeons to do triple takes.
What? I forgot about that one.
Such a fun vehicle, and just the epitome of ridiculous 70s Bond. It's just, you didn't get any sillier than this, and yet somehow it worked. Somehow it fit. And it was just so awesome. I love that scene. I especially love the triple taking pigeon. But it's just...
What? You just imagine him saying that.
But the Bondola is just too cool for me not to include that as my number 4. And a little extra trivia for you on this one. When when Roger Moore was filming that scene as James Bond, they usually have a lot for him for a scene like this. And he keeps getting them wet, so they have a lot of them. Well, he was down to his very last one by the time they finished this. But it's just such a cool scene. So, the Bondola at number 4.
Bondola. That did not make my list because I totally didn't remember that one at all. But I get it.
Wow.
It just didn't click in my head as one vehicle. Like, for some reason in my head, like, I thought of that as 3 separate vehicles, and not one of them was cool enough to make the list on its own. But then thinking of them, it's like, oh yeah, it did just kind of, it was a transformer.
It was.
But my number 4 was the Aerostar BD-5T from Octopussy, the horse trailer plane, as we talked about before. That was just such a great scene, such a great thing to see the horse's ass just lift up. Here comes a little plane
You're
out
into
the
that,
back of
are you?
it.
Okay.
Hey, you do what you got to do when you're lonely. But no, it's just a fun scene, and like we talked about before, it's integral to that particular film, and it's fantastic to watch, and it's just a great scene all around. So that's why it made my top 4.
Fair enough. What about your number 3, sir?
Number 3 is the freaking tank, man. James Bond driving a tank through the streets of Russia. In GoldenEye, obviously, like you said, it was supposed to be a T-80. It was actually a T-55 M5, but whatever. It was still a tank.
It's a freaking tank.
It was a freaking tank. And he used it so well, not only in the car chase, but then again, like you said, to face off to play chicken with a train, for crying out loud, and derail the damn train. It's just a fantastic scene.
And while Famke is, of course, making
He's going to derail us. Ooh. Like she was getting off. I love it. Oh, there's so many reasons to love that movie. But yeah, so that's why that one made my number 3. It was the frickin' tank from GoldenEye. What about you? What's your top 3?
My number 3 and my number 2 were actually very, very close to each other. It's like almost coin flip. But I finally decided that my number 3 is the Aston Martin Volante from The Living Daylights, because it is such a frickin' sexy car.
It is. It really is.
And it was. I thought it was very effectively used in the chase. I like the missiles. I like the few optional extras installed. I like the outriggers. I like the spike tires. It was cool. I love this car. And like you said, if I had a ton of money that I had no idea what to do with anymore, yeah, I might get one with all the optional extras installed, because, road rage is a real thing.
Sometimes you just want to shoot lasers out of your hubcaps. It just happens. Sometimes you just want to do that.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic car, beautiful car. I'm glad it made your list, and I'm surprised that it made it as high as it did, but that's fantastic. So, all right.
Yeah, I love this car. And then that moves us to the number 2 spot for me, which was, again, almost a coin flip, but from a view to a kill, the Bow Chicka Wow Wow Iceberg Submarine. Because, as you said, it's just so fun. It is a bachelor pad for playing wherever he wants to go. It's got the bed. It's got the full bar. It's got the co-pilot.
It's basically got nothing but a bed and a bar and then a station to control the thing. That's pretty much the entirety of the submarine. That's all you ever see. I mean,
play with your joystick.
It's a fantastic vehicle and just so very Bond. It's unbelievable. So I'm glad it made your list, and I'm surprised it made it as high as number 2. I only had it at number 13, but I'm glad it made your list. That's I was scared that it wouldn't make your list at all.
Bond needs a portable love nest. He needs the love machine. And he's not going to go around in a lowrider or a minivan that has the benefit of having lots of room in the back, or an 80 Pinto that has a lot of room in the back. He's going to go around in a portable love nest. So I had to go with the Iceberg Submarine.
Iceberg Submarine.
Hey, if the co-pilot's included, I'm not going to complain.
Not remotely. Yes, I concur wholeheartedly. No, that's definitely a good choice. For me, my number 2 was your number 10, and that's just because this was just such a cool vehicle, and he used, like you said, you made it as a down point on it, but I think it's an up point. He used everything about this vehicle, and that's Little Nelly, the little portable helicopter from You Only Live Twice. I love that thing. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed seeing Bond flying around in it. I would love to fly around in something like that if I could myself. Little Nelly, just awesome. Just awesome. That's my number 2.
Fair enough. Now, I'm going to just try an experiment here.
All right.
Call me psychic or something. Now, bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, Eric and I live a very long distance from each other. We have not told each other what's on our lists. We have not discussed these beforehand in terms of what's on them. Mm-hmm. However, I'm going to use my psychic powers. And I'm going to guess, as I did from the beginning, that there is one spot that we're going to agree. Now, it turns out we also agreed on the dumbest vehicle. So, would you like to together say what I bet we both said is the number 1 James Bond vehicle?
All right.
It is the Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger.
Also featured in Thunderball and Skyfall. But yes, absolutely. You can't not have this car at number 1. It is the Bond car. Anytime you talk about, Bond's car, the first thing you think of is this car. You don't think of any of the other ones until after the fact. You're like, oh yeah, he also drove that and that. Oh yeah, I guess he drove that as well. But no, the first thing you think of is this particular car. And it's for good reason, because it's got all the perfect toys. It's got everything he needs. And it's just so brilliantly put together, not to mention the fact that it's also just a damn sexy car. It's a beautiful car to begin with. So, yeah, how could number 1 be anything else, really?
It's just a phenomenal car. And it like you said, if you say James Bond car, this is the only one anyone thinks about first. Mm-hmm. They'll think about that Lotus from Spy Who Loved Me second.
Yeah.
I'd say for almost everyone, that's a second car they think of. But the first one is always the Aston Martin, and it is the prototypical spy car that everyone else has wanted to have be their spy car since then. In fact, when they made the video game Spy Hunter, it's obviously a James Bond, takeoff type thing. Yeah. But if you look at what gadgets originally come with your car, they are the gadgets from the Aston Martin DB5. Doesn't matter that the car doesn't look like that. It's the same gadgets because they're that cool.
Now, what did you think about them changing the history a little bit when they did the Casino Royale reboot? They kind of changed the backstory of where the DB5 came from.
It's one of those things that's open to interpretation. Maybe it's the same car. Maybe it's different. I would agree, though, in my own head. I imagine that that's where he got it from, and then there were refinements. But the thing is, the dialogue in Skyfall also suggests that it wasn't, because M knows about the ejector seat.
Yeah, she knows exactly
she knows
what
about
that
the
button
gadgets
does.
that are in there. So it makes me wonder if they're pulling that car off as a heritage vehicle that he may have gotten off of an older agent or something.
Right. Well, the other thing about it, though, is that he turns to that car because he doesn't want a company car, because all the company cars have tracking devices in them. So,
but this is an old company car
right.
that's been retired.
Right. So so it's debatable as to did they change the story to where obviously he won a DB5 that looked almost identical, from in Casino Royale. But did he then take that to Q Branch and say, hey, can you outfit this car for me? And then, at some point put it into storage between Casino Royale and Skyfall? Or was this the Goldfinger car and he just had it in storage since then? The argument could be made either way, I'm sure. Honestly, I didn't have a problem with them playing a little fast and loose with the history.
Care.
It didn't make that big a difference.
And it also made one more appearance. GoldenEye.
Oh, that's right.
It's the car he's driving when he's racing Famke when we first meet her.
That's right. He was in that's the car. He actually drives that car longer in the movie than he does the BMW. Of course, that's when we see that it's got the champagne chiller in the center armrest.
Of course.
Always interesting, but hey, it's Bond. He's got to have champagne and caviar at the ready, no matter where he is.
Absolutely, and like we said, it couldn't have been anything else. It just couldn't. This had to be the top of the list. This was the one no-brainer. Mm-hmm. I would have been shocked and perhaps even a little devastated if you didn't pick this car.
No, yeah, exactly. It's the one the very first thing you think of Bond cars, and this is the one that comes to mind. So it's impossible not to put it number one. You could make arguments for all the other cars for being, various. Oh, it's better at this or it's better at that. But as an overall Bond car, nothing beats that DB5. It's beautiful. It's sexy. It's got everything that he needs as far as gadgetry is concerned and weaponry and everything else. It's just the perfect Bond car.
So, point made, no argument. Great car. So that is our top 15 list for James Bond vehicles. Now we have our top 3 list of bonus vehicles. These are vehicles which James Bond himself did not drive or operate, but which he may have been a passenger in or may have been operated around him or by bad guys.
Yes.
So, what was your number 3 bonus vehicle? This
was a little bit tougher list because there were so many different vehicles that were used, especially by villains and stuff, which were just cool vehicles. So to narrow it down to 3, I kind of went big with all 3 of them. But my number 3 is probably the least grandiose of them all, and that is the AMC Matador from The Man with the Golden Gun. That would be the flying car. The AMC Matador with wings. Because, come on. It's a flying car.
It is a flying car with a dumb blonde in the trunk.
But yeah, you can't go. I mean, flying car. First of all, they based it on a real thing. Unfortunately, the real thing couldn't possibly do what they wanted it to do in the movie, so they had to use a model instead. But they did base it in reality, somewhat. But it's a flying car. I mean, you can't not have a flying car somewhere on the list when you're talking about Bond stuff. So my number 3 in the bonus is the AMC Matador with wings. Not to be confused with the always Maxi Fresh with wings. This is the AMC Matador with wings.
Do you ever feel not so fresh? You just had to go there, didn't you? You are a bad
I said
man.
With wings too many times. It popped into my head. I've been shopping for my wife. I'm sorry.
But now I had a few debates about what I was going to put at number 3 here. Mm-hmm. At one point, I had considered Goldfinger's car from Goldfinger because it's a solid gold car, and that's just cool.
Oh, yeah. His Rolls Royce was
However, I went with something that's conventional, but it is a damn sexy car, and it is used to wonderful effect in the movie it's used in, and that would be a 1968 Mustang that was driven by Tracy on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Okay. Yeah, that Mustang was beautiful. I mean, that was back in the days when Mustangs were actually Mustangs and not Pintos with a Mustang body or emblem thrown on it. It was a beautiful car. It really was.
And that chase scene was just fun. And it's especially fun because Bond isn't driving. He has to just sit there while Tracy is showing her stuff.
Yes.
And Diana Rigg is just phenomenal in that scene. I mean, she's phenomenal in the whole movie, but she's the one thing that's good about that whole movie.
I know it's kind of sad to think about it, but yes, that is true.
But I just had to include that car just because that chase scene was just so great. And it's a great car. And just more trivia for people. Goldfinger was the first movie ever to show any production Mustang. That would be the car that Miss Masterson was driving when Bond was trying to follow Goldfinger.
Oh, that's right.
But my pick for number 3 is the 1968 Mustang that was driven by Tracy in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
All right. What about your number 2?
My number 2 is a little more unconventional, and it sounds like I went in the exact opposite direction of you.
Okay.
Because this is not grandiose at all, and that's part of what makes it so damn funny.
Okay.
That would be the little mini-moke in Octopussy that's driven by VJ.
Wow. Okay.
Just because, on the same principle as the Citroen 2CV. Because it is one of the most ridiculous things you could ever imagine James Bond being in a chase in, and he's not even driving it. So he's stuck throwing cash out the back.
A rupee!
This thing is popping wheelies.
Wow, I did not expect that. I will be honest with you, I did not expect that to make the list. Any list at all, ever, in the history of this show.
It's just so fun.
That is fantastic. Wow. Yes,
I had to. I just had to.
I don't think I could have gone possibly more opposite with you. My number 2 was Max Zorin's frickin' blimp. Okay.
All right.
It's a blimp, for crying out loud. The bad guy's flying around in a damn blimp. How awesome is that? And that's, of course, From A View to a Kill. And he had 2 of them, too. He had the big one, and then he had the little one that was in the trailer and whatnot. So, oh, man, just blimps are cool, first of all.
Blimps are cool.
And
it's not even a steam pump blimp, and it's cool.
Yeah, and you got Christopher Walken as the bad guy flying around in a bloody blimp. I mean, you can't go wrong there. It's fantastic. Okay, maybe not the most maneuverable vehicle that a villain has ever had. Maybe not the most practical. One could argue.
You can drop henchmen out the bottom.
Absolutely, you can. So, yeah, my number 2 on the bonus vehicles is Zorin's blimp. Now, number
I'm now
1,
beginning to wonder if we're going to agree on one more thing.
I'm thinking possibly, only because you specified that what I chose as number 1 would not qualify for a Bond vehicle, but would qualify for a bonus vehicle. So what did you have for your numero uno bonus vehicle?
My number 1 vehicle, which is also the title of a film. Would you like to say it together?
Is it perhaps the Moonraker? Yes. You can't not have a space shuttle. If a space shuttle has been a vehicle in a Bond movie, you can't not have it on the list. You can't not have it at number 1. But you're right, Bond did not physically pilot the Moonraker space shuttle himself, so it does have to go onto the bonus list, but it has to be number 1 on the bonus list. Even if the supposed low gravity or no gravity scenes were just awfully, awfully acted. I mean, granted, yes, the technology was not there to film zero-G scenes.
Zero gravity scene was kind of cool.
But, no, I mean, yeah, Bond in a spaceship, for crying out loud. I mean, that trumps Bond in a frickin' tank. It just does.
It really does.
So,
it's just like we said, he didn't fly it. He operated the laser, but Dr. Goodhead flew it.
Goodhead.
I'd fly with Dr. Goodhead.
Damn right I would, especially if I didn't have to operate the vehicle. What?
Yeah, just play with your joystick.
Things took a
play
turn.
With your joystick and shoot.
And shoot the laser.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
Pew, pew, pew.
Soft lasers.
Things went downhill fast. Things really took a turn. But yeah, definitely, obviously, Bond in a spaceship, Bond in a space station. I mean, I considered including the entire space station, but that's not really a vehicle so much as a location. I call that a set. Yeah.
The same thing with the Orient Express. It's too damn big.
Exactly. It's more of a location than a vehicle, even though it is technically moving. It's more of a destination. So, but yeah, the Moonraker, especially, not only were they space shuttles, but they were space shuttles outfitted with tactical lasers. Come on now.
Lasers!
Pew, 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 pew! Yes, the special effects could have been better, especially in the sound department, but we wouldn't have such fond memories of it if they actually sounded decent, would we?
Exactly. The cheese made it work. And like Bond in a space shuttle, like we said, you just can't have it at anything other than number 1. So there you go. Bonus vehicle, the Moonraker.
So I have a question for you.
Yes,
if
sir.
you could see James Bond driving any vehicle that he has not previously driven, any type of vehicle whatsoever, what would you choose to have Bond drive?
That depends on who's playing him.
Oh, let's go current Bond. Let's imagine that the next movie is going to have the scene in which you get to choose what James Bond, played by Daniel Craig, is driving or operating, whatever.
Okay. At that point, just because I think it would be really interesting, I would like to see James Bond driving a Trans Am, Smokey and the Bandit style.
Talking like 70s, 80s?
Yeah.
All right.
Like late 70s Trans Am. Or if we want to go a little bit different, so I'll give you some more Bonds here. Roger Moore, I would like to see him on a Harley Davidson.
Okay. I can imagine that. Actually, which is kind of amusing.
And I would like to see Sean Connery in an old mafia movie 20s Packard.
Is that the one with the suicide doors?
The suicide doors, the big-ass white walls, preferably holding a Tommy gun.
Didn't we see that in The Untouchables?
But we didn't see it in a Bond movie, now, did we?
Okay. All right, fair enough.
That's why I said Sean Connery.
I could definitely see Sean Connery driving that because I think I have. Yeah, it would be interesting to see it as a Bond character driving around in a vehicle like that. That would be quite interesting.
And then just because he's the most manly, I think, in terms of you just can't picture him as being anything other than this testosterone type guy. Timothy Dalton, and this is going to sound sacrilegious, but I would only use this in an outtake. I wouldn't use it in an actual movie. Okay. Well, maybe I would. Is if somehow he ended up having to take a vehicle from a Fast and Furious street racing scene and he got the typical chick's Hello Kitty painted Honda.
Timothy Dalton in a Hello Kitty painted Ricer.
Yes.
I can't even. Oh my goodness gracious, that is...
You noted that a lot of the stuff we picked today, I picked for amusement. So
that would certainly...
I'll keep with my theme of amusement.
Be amusing. Yes, absolutely. Wow.
Oh, you, sir.
See, I would go more...
I really want to see George Lazenby in anything.
No, yeah. Maybe a wreck. But anyways, no, that's mean. No, for me, I would go supercar on it. I mean, I want to see, he's obviously driving really nice cars to begin with. He's always in BMWs or Aston Martins or things like that. I'd love to see him in true full-on supercar mode. I want to see him in a Lamborghini. I want to see him driving the Bugatti Veyron or something like that.
I can see Pierce Brosnan doing that.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see Brosnan in a Veyron. That would be pretty awesome. Craig, I would think more. He seems a little bit more simple in the taste. I think he'd go more for something like maybe the Audi R8, something like that would be more his speed. But that's how I would go with that. It'd be just straight up supercar. Other than that, I'd like to see maybe a commercial jet. That would be fun.
Concorde.
Oh, there you go. I was thinking 747 or something like that, but yeah, okay, we'll go even bigger.
No, we got to go Bond. We got to go Concorde.
But I think they've done a really good job overall. I think they've done a really good job in picking the vehicles for the various movies. I mean, obviously, some impact has been had based on who's paying the bills.
Of course,
BMW showed up because BMW said, "Hey, we'll pay to have our cars in there." But I think they did a good job of saying, "Okay, well, that's fine. We'll put your car in here, but this is the car we're going to put in here." The Z3 was a beautiful car. It was very Bondy. Unfortunately, Bond didn't get to drive it much, but it was still a nice car. The 750 was perfect for what it was. Being a kind of nondescript type of Bond car that ended up having every gadget in the world. I thought that was perfect. And of course, the Aston Martins, all of them have just been sexy as all hell. Every single one of them. So,
oh yeah,
you can't go wrong there. And and even the Lotuses. I mean, by today's standards, they look kind of. I mean, they're very 80s. You look at a Lotus Esprit from the 80s and you think, oh wow, it's like you took the entirety of the 80s and packed it into a car right there. But for the time, it was absolutely beautiful, and I'd still.
But he never drove a Pontiac Fiero.
It's because the transmissions kept going out.
It disturbs to see those with collector plates now. By the way. They're that old.
Oh, man. But we've seen Bond in so many different vehicles. I mean, obviously, all sorts of different boats, all sorts of different cars, planes, trains, tanks. I mean, there's really not much left that he, other than specific models of certain cars or certain types of things that we haven't seen him in. Can you think of any type of specific conveyance that we have not seen Bond in yet?
Let's see. He's done a jet ski. He's done a snowmobile. Hang glider. Piloted a military jet. Mm-hmm. Speedboats.
Yeah.
Theoretically, a yacht.
Yeah. Frickin' spaceship.
Small submarines he's been in. So, moon buggy.
But he hasn't actually been in a moon buggy on the moon. So next movie, we're putting Daniel Craig in a moon buggy on the, you know what? Mars. That's what we're putting him on the rover.
There you go. Curiosity, you got company. The Millennium Falcon.
Oh, there we go. There's mixing our metaphors right there. I want to see. I would go with young Connery in an X-wing. If I were going to mix Bond and Star Wars, I'd say young Connery in an X-wing. If I was mixing my Bond and Star Trek, I would say, it would be a tough one. But I think I would go with medium age, Moore, Captain of the Enterprise.
I would go with Roger Moore driving a DeLorean powered by Mr. Fusion.
Okay.
And Daniel Craig in a Tron light cycle.
Nice. See, I was going to put Craig in the captain's seat of the Serenity, but that's just me. So, what you going to do? When are we going to see Bond time travel? That's what I want to know. Come on now. That's the only type of machine he hasn't been in yet at this point. I
think that's going to be the functional equivalent of the next Die Another Day.
Yeah, I love time travel stories. I really do, but I would not want to see Bond time travel. That would be too much outside of the whole thing with Bond is that he's just outside of the realm of real possibility. And time travel, while I love it as a genre, is not even close to theoretically possible, so it's totally out there sci-fi, and I would not want to see Bond in that situation. That would actually ruin it. As much as I joke around, that would be a bad thing. We don't want to see Bond
most of what we've said for what would you want to see Bond in, except for the really hot cars and maybe the Tron light cycle, we really don't need it. And of course, there's one that almost made my list of Bond vehicles that I have to mention since we're talking about the ridiculous.
Okay.
Because it's a very specific kind of vehicle, a Zamboni.
Oh, that's right.
He drove a Zamboni for about 5 seconds in For Your Eyes Only.
Yes, he did. Hey, Bonies. Yeah, sorry about that, eh? But, so do you have anything else that you want to throw out there about Bond vehicles or gadgets that we haven't covered in this extensive episode so far?
Nope, I think we've covered everything we wanted to for Bond's toys, discussing stuff we really wish were under our tree, but wasn't. And that would, of course, be Bond gadgets and Bond vehicles. But we're really glad that you all came along for the ride. And if you'd like to talk to us about any of Bond's toys, you can reach us online. You can find me on Twitter. I am at CinemaOTR. You can also email me directly at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com. You can also visit my website, cinemaontherocks.com, where you can see reviews of Bond movies, lots of other movies, and web series and short films. So come on, check it out.
Do it. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Eric J. Dewey. Don't forget to follow the entire Four-Eyed Radio Network at the Sasquatch Net. You can email me at eric@foureyedradio.com or eric@hermajestiespod.com. I've got so many email addresses I just forget sometimes. It's amazing. But don't forget to check us out on the web. We are at hermajestiespod.com. We're also on facebook.com/hermajestiespod and on Twitter at hermajestiespod. We try to make it as easy as possible. Everything's Her Majesty's Pod. So I think that just about does it for this week. Do you have anything else?
It does. So next week, well, not next week, but in about 2 weeks, if we go by our normal release schedule, we will be talking about some of the locations of 007, including evil henchman hideouts and all sorts of other fun things. It's location, location, location.
Do I hear
on the next episode
volcano?
of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast.
Hi, this is Jeff from the 12A Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please make sure to check out more on foureyedradio.com.